Hello, digital world. Welcome back to another episode of Spliced In Later, the first episode of 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you're keeping safe wherever you are in the world and you've managed to avoid the dreaded Omicron, which is surging and making life just wonderful for everybody at the moment. But we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on a brand new year, which means a brand new year of movies, which means more Spliced In Later content that I'll be very excited to hopefully be sharing with you on a very frequent basis. But we will just have to see. Movies are already being postponed as we speak. But today's episode is the first of two episodes, though, that are just recapping 2021, essentially finalizing that. We have a review for you today, which technically is a 2021 film, even though I have only just seen it now, as here in Australia, we didn't get it till today, January 6th. But I wanted to see it before I made my top 10 movies of 2021, just in case, because this movie is one that has been postponed since the dawn of the pandemic. People say No Time to Die was the first real tragedy, but to be fair, a lot of movies followed in quick succession around No Time to Die as well. And this one, I believe, was supposed to be released in April 2020, maybe March, then was postponed, I think, about 6 or 7 times before finally being released at the back end of 2021 when it was supposed to be released at the start. So I thought only fair that I see it because it comes from a franchise that I genuinely enjoy. I like the actors in it. I was pretty keen to see if it was an interesting concept that would live up to its potential. And then once I had seen it, I can officially stamp off my top 10 movies of 2021 and give that list to you, because I know that is a favorite here on this channel, on this podcast. People like my rankings because there's a lot of content there. There genuinely is some very long episodes too, but the movies that I rank are out there or wildly different to what other people's lists would be. So, before we bring you that episode though, we are reviewing The Kingsman, directed by Matthew Vaughn, starring Ralph Fiennes, and serving as a prequel to the Kingsman franchise. Now, a bit of housekeeping before we get into it. Kingsman is the sleeper hit of 2014, I think was when it first came out, maybe 15. It was a movie based on a comic series called The Secret Service. It was directed by Matthew Vaughn, and it was a nice blend of over-the-top violent action and very silly, kooky Matthew Vaughn style humor. It was sort of a love letter to James Bond stuff, Super Spy, all of that stuff, but also injecting that superhero-y stuff that everybody's getting used to at the moment in the present day. This was at a time when Taron Egerton was an unknown actor. Taron Egerton plays Eggsy in that movie, our protagonist. But if you look at the poster for Kingsman, The Secret Service, the main actors on there listed are Colin Firth, Samuel L. Jackson, and Michael Caine. And I believe even Mark Strong is credited before Taron Egerton. Now, Taron Egerton is Elton John, his big name. If they want to sell you on another Kingsman movie, they put his name front and center. Apologies if you can hear my cats running around. They've decided to chase each other. It must be that time of night. Now, I only went and saw Kingsman: The Secret Service because I heard from a friend that it was good, and it checked off all the buttons for me. Everybody acting in it was sensational, all those people I mentioned. The action was great, very violent, but also over-the-top sort of violent. The humor was funny. The comedic timing between Taron Egerton and Colin Firth was just wonderful. Samuel L. Jackson's over-the-top Bond-style villain and his plan for world domination or whatever he was doing in that film was great. The tension was well-paced. Everything with the action and the comedy until it culminated in a very fantastic ending sequence. Now, it must have done very well. I think it surprised everybody how successful Kingsman was, which of course meant we got to make a sequel. So Kingsman: The Golden Circle came out in 2017. Now, personally, I quite enjoyed it. I liked it, but I know some friends of mine who really liked the first Kingsman who were utterly disappointed by the second one, to a point where they're off the franchise entirely. I think what happened with The Golden Circle was Matthew Vaughn reacting to what everybody loved about the first Kingsman and just ramping it up. But by ramping it up and thinking more is better, it substituted from an actual genuine sort of story. But I liked it. I thought there was some good stuff in there. I liked some of they brought in the Statesman, which was the American version of Kingsman. So you got Channing Tatum, Jeff Bridges, Halle Berry, Pedro Pascal, Julianne Moore was the villain in that one. There's some good moments, in my opinion. But after that, I think the critical belief for the Golden Circle wasn't so great. So rather than moving into a Kingsman 3, Matthew Vaughn has been focused on making a prequel, basically establishing the Kingsman Secret Service, secret organization that has been established in these movies. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Kingsman in these movies is a super secret Bond society of English noblemen, gentlemen, if you will, who are all about being proper, wearing suits, manners maketh man. Their whole ideology is idolized around King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So all their code names are knights or dignitaries from Camelot, like Arthur, Guinevere, Merlin, all of that stuff. They are very skilled in hand-to-hand combat, and they're very violent when they need to be, but they also are very first and foremost gentlemen who, if they can, will resort to conversation and dignitaries and the image, manners maketh man, all of that stuff. So the prequel that has been talked about for many a time is, where did this organization come from? Where did it grow from? Who was the first Kingsman? Which is basically what the Kingsman is. So, the Kingsman, notoriously delayed for so long. What do I think of it? I liked it, but I didn't love it. Unfortunately, I think it suffered a lot from being a bit too ambitious in what it was doing, a bit too all over the place in terms of everything that it was doing, all the different characters, the plotline, the story. The pacing was way off, unfortunately. This movie is nearly 2.5 hours, and there are certain scenes that go on for way too long than they should. The humor was either non-existent or was played foolishly or didn't work. Bits where they expected people to be laughing but really weren't. And actors were underutilized in certain bits as well. However, it was salvaged a bit in its last act. Now, I know that sounds pretty down on the movie as a simple sum up, but I think it's important to note that I really like the first Kingsman film, and I don't mind the second one. And I have this respect for the material and the way these movies are shot and told, and its humor and action, to a point where I may be unfairly biased against this one. And also because of the pandemics, this is one of those movies that I've been waiting for a very long time because of the delays. So one could say that I'm being a bit overly critical. I know my friend who I went and saw it with quite liked it quite a bit. And I think that looking back on it, I like it more than I liked it when I was watching it, if that makes sense. I think because the story itself, while bombastic and all over the place, and I wasn't really sure what the heck was the point of it all, its final action point at the end with Ralph Fiennes facing off against the big secret bad of the movie was entertaining. That was the Kingsman I knew. The action, the super spy face off against the villain with little bits of humor here and there. It felt like the Kingsman I know. But let's start with basically a basic plot point for this movie. The Kingsman revolves around Ralph Fiennes, who plays the Duke of Oxford. He is essentially the first Kingsman. The Kingsman organization doesn't exist yet. By the end of the movie, of course, it will. But the Duke is a very proper English gentleman raising his son. Now, due to a tragedy when the son was very young, the Duke has become very protective. So the son is old enough now that he wants to get involved in his father's secret affairs, but he's like, nope, you stay at home where it's safe. You must never ever die. Meanwhile, the backdrop going on is World War I. So our super secret, sinister villain, who you never see his face, and has a very strong Scottish accent, has brought together a group of sinister dignitaries who you will probably recognize from history. Most specifically, they focus on Rasputin, played by Rhys Ifans, but also Lenin and some other characters. I don't know history particularly well, but my friends was laughing, so I guess there were some that I didn't catch. Anyway, they manipulate the Kaiser, the Caesar, and King George so that World War I officially begins. A side note, all three of these rulers are played by Tom Hollander, because in real life they were cousins. So he plays them all, and it sort of works, but it's not used enough for it to really be funny in any sort of the way. It's just sort of, they look similar, I guess. Anyway, moving on. So while World War I essentially plays out in the background, the Duke and his son and his two servants, his main servants, Jimon Hunsu and Gemma Arterton, eventually get wrapped up in what's going on. They get pulled in for the Duke, quite unwillingly. The son, Conrad, very much wants to join up and fight in the war, and he's like, absolutely not, I refuse, you will not be involved in this fighting one way or another. Some stuff happens, there's some tragedies for all people involved, but by the end of the movie, Ralph Fiennes has embraced his identity as an agent for the crown, for King George, and with his subordinates and his super secret network that he's been secretly establishing with servants, he eventually tracks down, finds the super secret bad guy, and takes him on to essentially save the world, in our minds, because we're watching it, from how World War I ended, which is basically get the Americans involved in the war. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of actors, a lot of characters, a lot of segues, a lot of different plot points, which would take forever to go into, and I guess sort of spoils the trajectory of the movie. I will say in the movie's favor that even though some things felt a bit pointless, everything did come to a natural conclusion. Some of it was a bit heavy-handed, but there wasn't a scene that wasn't relevant to something later on. Our positives here are Ralph Fiennes as the Duke. He is great. I love Ralph Fiennes as an actor, and I think, quite annoyingly, people from my generation really only appreciate him as being Voldemort from Harry Potter. But Voldemort, Harry Potter, Ralph Fiennes is not given nearly enough to show his acting chops in those movies. If you want to see Ralph Fiennes as an actor, if you want to see his comedic timing, watch The Grand Budapest Hotel. If you want to see him as scary and violent, more scary than he is as Voldemort, watch Schindler's List. He can be a good side character, he can be a good English Pratt, he can do all sorts of stuff, and I think that it's important to recognize that. And this movie shows that he can also be a super spy, a superhero, that sort of thing. He isn't given much to really act on until that final act. I felt like he was wasted a lot in it. He sort of was going through the motions of the tragic father and the stuff that'll get him to become the Kingsman. I really wanted him to sink his teeth into the role, which he didn't really get to do until the last bit of the movie, which is fine, but if the movie's 2.5 hours long, that's too long to wait for him to get to that point. I also thought his subordinates, Jimon Hunsu and Gemma Arterton, I forget the names of their characters in the movie, but they were great as his subordinates or sidekicks. They're essentially the first Knights of the Round Table for the Kingsman, and they are fun when they're also allowed to be on screen. There are also here or there are some actors that really stand out or steal the scene, the spotlight when they're in. The super secret bad guy with his very strong Scottish accent, he's fun to listen to and rattle off his plans. The network of evil thugs that he's got, it's fun to see how they show up and what role they have to play in essentially getting the World War to go along. And the action pieces are also great when they actually happen. They're too far between. There's a lot of waiting around for certain things, but there's some great action scenes in the Somme on World War I, in the final battle, a duel with Rasputin. There's some good stuff in there. It's just unfortunately too spaced out. I think by the end of the movie, I appreciated it for what it was, and it did really well at establishing the Kingsman Society. But unfortunately, the movie suffers a lot from just not knowing what it wants to do. The World War I subplot is interesting for that to be the backdrop for the Kingsman, but there are so many characters with so many roles to play, so many diverging points that there are chunks. The movie takes place essentially over 4 years, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like it happens over 2 weeks. There's a really specific point I want to point out where the Duke and Conrad and their friends, they've just had a fight with Rasputin, and they're traveling on a train, and suddenly one of the characters walks in and says, "Happy birthday to Conrad." So I guess it is the Duke's son's birthday. I didn't know it was coming up, but now it's his birthday. And I spent the whole time going, is it his birthday literally, or are they celebrating his first mission with his father? Is it his birthday into becoming a part of this society? And then he goes, now it's my birthday, I'm going to go join up in World War I. It's like, oh, okay, so it's his actual birthday. His actual birthday has come. It has happened now. And then suddenly he's off and he's in World War I. I was like, how much time has passed? That's the big issue here, is pacing. So much stuff is rocketing along in this first act, and it doesn't give you a time to breathe in certain areas. And then in other scenes go on for way too long. I want to single out specifically Rasputin, played by Rhys Ifans. I don't know how other people feel about it. Personally, for me, he was the worst part of the movie. He's played to be funny, I think. We're supposed to be laughing, but I didn't find what he was doing, or his portrayal, or the way he was acting to be funny or disturbing or anything like that. It was just boring. Boring is the nicest way I can put it. And also, again, this is something that shouldn't need to be said, but movies are still sometimes going, hey, this guy is into men and he's hitting on a man who's not into men. Isn't being gay funny? Now, I know it's Rasputin, so, take of that what you will, but I thought we were past the point where, homosexuality, awkward situation, isn't this funny? Isn't it funny when some people are gay? No, it's not really. We need to move past it. It is 2022 now. Come on now. Furthermore, there's a scene where Rasputin and Ralph Fiennes are sharing a conversation together, and it just goes on for too long, and Rhys Ifans is just all over the place with trying to be weird and kooky. And then it's just like, come on, okay, get to the point. And that's when you realize the length of the movie. You go, what is happening? Where are we going? What's the point? The comedy as well, besides the Rasputin thing, which I didn't find funny, what is great about that first Kingsman movie, it is a nice blend between super spy over-the-top action and comedy. Taron Egerton's comedic timing as Eggsy, who's just... it's basically classism in that first movie. He's one of the slobs, the slummy people who gets into this super secret organization which is made up of dignitaries and noblemen, and he says bruv and things like that, and he doesn't react the way he's supposed to. But the way he reacts to this sort of stuff is funny, and the way Harry Hart, played by Colin Firth, reacts to him or teaches him how to do certain things at times can be hilarious. But here, either the comedy doesn't work or there is no comedy, and it's a miserable affair. Ralph Fiennes and Conrad, and that relationship between father and son in the start is so miserable. And I remember thinking, there was a point halfway through the movie where I went, I haven't laughed once. And there's not many points where I remember them trying to make me laugh. This is not the style and the mood and the theme that the Kingsman franchise is memorable for. So why would you make a prequel to that and not have it feel like that? It's strange. I'm not sure what was going on there. Look, it sounds like I'm really shitting on this movie, and I'm not really. It's just it's a mess that could do with certainly trimming out some scenes, quickening things up, really putting a leash on your actors. I don't like directors who say, oh man, Rhys Ifans was having his moment, so I just let him just improvise and then I put all that in the movie. As a director, you need to go, okay, that's funny sitting here on set watching him do it, but let's think. Are people who are sitting in a movie theater who aren't on set with us, who are living this emotion with us, are they going to have the same reaction? I don't think so. However, it is salvaged a lot in its final act. It is a very fun, fast-paced action adventure showdown, which is very much missing from the first part of the movie. And Ralph Fiennes really gets to shows off why he was a great choice to play the Duke of Oxford, the first Kingsman, the founder of the Kingsman Institute. The super secret bad guy, who he is, how that is revealed, is fun. I guess if you're smart, you'll probably see it coming. I didn't, but I think because my brain was already imploding on just trying to crack all the other baffling things that were going on. But it is entertaining, and it does sort of make the end of the movie come a lot quicker, which it doesn't sound like a compliment to say, yay, the movie finished quicker. But I mean that because I was enjoying myself for that part, and it's noticeable when you are suddenly enjoying yourself in a movie where beforehand you were just going, what's going on? To sum it up, The Kingsman, it gets a 5 out of 10 from me, which people have said to me like, oh, you said you hated the movie, but you give it a 5 out of 10. A 5 out of 10 is middle ground. I do not regret seeing a lot of movies. I don't regret seeing The Kingsman, and there were bits I liked, but it's also not disappointing. I'm not disgusted with it. I get nothing out of it, unfortunately. I will, of course, watch it again to complete my Kingsman collection when the DVDs are released, but overall, it's a fairly forgettable film that's a bit all over the place, is far too long, doesn't really know what it wants to be or what mood it wants to set, and doesn't allow the very, very, very cream of the crop actors that it's got involved to really embrace their characters. certain moments here and there, especially at the end, don't really salvage it, unfortunately. I think it's fair to say that The Kingsman will not be cracking my top 10 movies of 2021. It won't be getting an honorable mention either. But it's only fair that I waited to see it before I can officially cap that off. Whether you want to see The Kingsman, entirely up to you. As I've said many times before, ironically, don't listen to me. My opinion on movies is my opinion alone. People should go and see these movies and make up your own mind for yourself. I know people that really like movies that I hate. I know that I really like movies that other people hate. We all have to make our own minds up. However, The Kingsman is only available in the cinemas. So if you are currently worried that Omicron is surging and you don't want to get it, I would argue that this isn't the movie to get COVID for. Make of that what you will. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed our very first episode for 2022. I don't think it's too negative. I started off last year with Monster Hunter, and boy did I shit on that movie. So, spoilers, I guess Monster Hunter won't be on my top 10 movies either. But be sure to tune in over the next day, because my top 10 movies of 2021 will be hitting. I'll try and keep the episode under an hour. I'll be timing myself as I talk about each movie, and hopefully we'll have a very strong episode for you. There will be honorable mentions for movies that I haven't even reviewed on this channel, so be sure to check in for that. Until then, thanks for listening. Look forward to a good new year with you, and plenty more movies to go and see and to hopefully be more positive about. And I'll catch you tomorrow for my top 10 movies of 2021. Thanks very much, everybody. Stay safe, stay kind. I love and appreciate you as always. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.